The Binding of Isaac is a roguelike video game where you play as a little child that uses weaponized depression to fight back against the many monsters that live underneath its house. It started off as a little indie game jam made by Edmund McMillan and Florian Himsel, which then turned into a beautiful gem of a flash game that took the internet by storm. This then led to a sequel and then 3 expansions for said sequel. To be honest, this is probably my favorite series of all time, and I fell in love with it as a child, and ever since then it stuck with me throughout my life. After over 2 years of Repentance being out, I am now one unlock away from a fully 100% every save file. To celebrate this, I've decided to use my knowledge and my opinions from my journey to make a tier list of all the characters in Repentance. This list will be a mix of how good I think a character is, and how much I personally do or do not like a character. This is not an objective list based on how strong every character is, so take it with a grain of salt. Starting with the F tier, these characters are ones that I barely play, and when I do, it is mainly for unlocks, and then I never ever play them again, and I just forget they exist. To start off the F tier is Tainted Cain. God, do I hate this character. What started as a character who is notorious for 2-hour-long runs and insane amount of game breaking has been turned into an annoying guy with a bag that destroys everything he touches. Tainted Cain is a nuisance to play, and it feels like it belongs as a challenge more than anything else. The rework that he did get was definitely needed. He was very overpowered, and he broke the game super easily, but now he just sits comfortably at the bottom of the tier list. Tainted Lazarus is almost as annoying to play as Tainted Cain is, but honestly, the rework of his starting item, Flip, gave him the slight edge over Cain. Lazarus is basically like playing 2 runs at the same time, and at every room you go to, you switch to your other run. If you have one run that's doing really well, and the other is doing bad, it makes going back to the worst side feel so annoying, especially if you get unlucky and get it during a boss fight or an annoying room that you have to deal with. Tainted Lazarus is a neat gimmick, but that's all he is, a gimmick. He'd fit a lot better if he was just a challenge, so he also goes in the F tier. And now the D tier. Before I continue, I'd like to say that most of the characters in Isaac are pretty good. Most of the power of a character comes from the items that you pick up during a run. This is why most characters I deem to be low on the list are characters that either mess up how items are gained or still put your run at risk even with good items. And speaking of that, our next character is Tainted Lost. I don't think I really have to say why he's down here. To be fair, on paper he sounds pretty alright. He starts with a Holy card, which is a 1-use Holy Mantle, and every card he finds has a 10% chance to be a Holy card. But the thing is, once you start playing as him, you realize that cards really don't spawn that much, and when they do, you rarely ever hit that 10% chance to get the Holy card. This leaves you with basically 1 hit for the whole game, and then if anything even sneezes in your direction, your whole run is over. D tier for you, Mr. Lost. Honestly, Tainted Eden isn't that bad of a character, but there really isn't anywhere else to put this guy. They're just like normal Eden, but every time you get hit, everything you have completely rerolls. You basically become a new Eden and all your items get D4'd. It's really hit or miss, and the whole time you play as them, you'll be terrified of losing the amazing reroll you get or hoping for the sweet release of death. The first non-tainted character of the list is Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau share a lot of similar issues with Tainted Lazarus, but they do it a little bit better. Instead of you and your other run swapping every room, you have to play both of these runs at the same time. This is good and bad. You get extra firepower from having 2 characters at the same time, but you also have to juggle items between them, which leads to you spamming items on one of the characters and just really hoping that the other one doesn't die. Dying is also a lot easier with them in general, because you have 2 hitboxes to move instead of just one. This makes dodging a lot harder because instead of relying on one character to move, you rely on both. And the one upside is that you can get both items in the alternate paths with them, but that's really about it. Now, C tier. This is where we reach the middle of the road characters. These guys are all pretty alright, but have something that holds them back just a little bit from that B tier. Tainted Eve is pretty, okay. She starts with an item that takes half of a heart and makes a little blood clot to fight with you. You can use this to create forms of blood clots to destroy everything in their path, but doing that requires a lot of health in a pretty good run. Tainted Eve just lacks in damage compared to her non-tainted counterpart, which makes it really annoying if you can't get any good damage upgrades. This, and her constant sacrificing of HP just to deal damage, really leaves her at the bottom of C tier. Blue Baby is just a very meh character. He has average stats, starts with a really shitty item, no pun intended, and can only have soul hearts. He got a little bit better thanks to his double deal and taking less health now, but it can't stop him from being a little bit underwhelming. For these characters, I'll be ranking them together as they're very similar. They have the exact same stats, except Tainted Apollyon has -1 tier delay. Their active items are also basically very similar, quite the same. Void and Abyss both remove items and replace them with something else. Void absorbs active items into itself and turns passives into stat upgrades. And Abyss turns all items into attack flies that you can launch at enemies. To me, these characters are just both very boring. Getting rid of an item for something else can be tantalizing if you get something bad, but leaving your stats up to RNG and fighting with little flies is just kind of obnoxious sometimes. I'd say that regular Apollyon is slightly better due to his stat upgrades, but these guys both sit at the top of C tier. Finally, we're on to B tier. These next couple of tiers have a lot of characters in them, so I'll try to spend less time on each character than I did in the lower tiers. To start off, we have Maggie. Is just honestly a very well-rounded character. She has lots of health, and she starts with an item that heals you for free, and Repentant, she gets a full health pill to start with, which is really useful if you get in a sticky situation and you need to pop that to heal. The only real downside is that you start off a bit slow. She's really tanky, but you still gotta rely on items to bring her to the end of her run, so that's why she drops right at the bottom of B tier. Tainted Forgotten is a very strong character. Throwing his body around causes a lot of damage, and if you get a bunch of items that increase the size of his bone, it makes him a big force to be reckoned with. The only problem is that every time you throw him, you have to go pick up the body. This can lead you to get to some really shitty situations where you can't defend yourself. Although he has some really easy item breaks, and he can lead to a lot of good, strong damage, he's just tricky to play, and it lands him right in B tier. Lazarus is probably one of the best glow-ups that I've seen in Repentance. He used to be down there with Blue Baby, and now he's a lot better. He starts with lackluster stats, but he gets a free revive every floor. Not only does he get this, but he gains a permanent 0.5 damage every time he dies. You can use this to exploit sacrifice runes or devil deals to get some goodies while also getting free damage. It doesn't make him super powerful though, but it makes him a hell of a lot more fun to play. Solid B tier for you, buddy. Samson is pretty good. He increases damage on the floor when you get hit, and he starts with a trinket that spawns more hearts. With this, you can farm for a lot of self-hurt damage with curse rooms and blood donation machines, and it gives them a lot more value. We love Samson, and he belongs in B. Lilith is another great character. While she suffers from a bit of a shitty aim, she makes up for it with her starting items. Campion Conception brings you more familiars as you take damage, and Box of Friends takes your familiars and adds more of them. If you can get lots of familiars, she becomes insanely powerful. Lilith in B tier really puts the B in BFF. To distract you from that awful pun, we have Eve. Eve seems quite weak at first, starting with less damage than usual, and with an item that damages herself. Then, once you reach 1 heart, you realize that she's actually an almighty demon with the power to destroy everything in her sight. The only downside to playing Eve is that you have to keep your red health low, which can be difficult if you don't keep her Razor, but this doesn't stop her from ranking in B tier. Tainted Jacob is what happens in the aftermath of your Jacob and Esau run. where you gave all of your items to Jacob, and used Esau as the body shield the whole run. As Tainted Jacob, Esau is now Dark Esau, and he chases you around trying to murder you for what you did to him. This would seem bad if it wasn't for his item, Anima Sola. With Anima Sola, you can turn Esau into a freight train of hellfire to send at any enemy. If Esau hits, he does crazy damage and burns the enemy with a fire that does 300 goddamn DPS. The icing on top of this Esau cake is that he completely ignores boss armor. This leaves all final bosses vulnerable to being Esau'd. Don't let Esau touch you though, or else you immediately start up a Tainted Lost run, and trust me, those usually don't end very pretty. To cap off B tier, we have Eden. There isn't a lot to say about them. They are completely random, and what you get is based off your need. You can either get something good, bad, or meh. That is why Eden is right here in the middle of this tier list. A tier is where we start seeing some of the real staple characters of Isaac. These are characters that I often like to revisit and play runs with just for fun. Tainted Blue Baby. It's like if you took Blue Baby and turned his active item into his whole entire kit. He is an incredibly shitty character, and yes, the pun was intended this time. His main gimmick is that bombs are replaced with a cycle of shit to throw at your enemies. These poops are pretty good, and you can combo them together to buff him, poison enemies, damage enemies, and even spawn some flies for you. I'd say this counters all of his downside from his pre-tainted self, and he's very fun to play, and I love this shitty little boy. Bottom of A tier for you. Tainted Maggie is like Maggie, but turns 80% of her health into temporary health that slowly bleeds out of you. This sounds bad, but then you realize that she has an ability to deal 6 times your damage by hugging your enemies. And on top of that, every enemy you kill will have a chance to drop half of a red heart that disappears in 2 seconds. Basically, you slam enemies with your temporary health and heal it all back to do it again. I've heard that her hugs are an A tier. Tainted Samson is a broiling ball of rage that steamrolls through rooms once you activate his berserk mode. He gets a jawbone to slash at the enemies with, and the more you kill, the longer you stay in berserk. This incentivizes you to push through as many rooms as you can while trying to stay in rage for as long as possible. He's incredibly fun to play though, and I will say that late game can be a bit annoying if you deal a lot of damage as he enters rage a lot, but despite this, he's a solid choice for A tier. Tainted Azazel is like a little clipped version of Azazel. He can't fly, and his brimstone is long and skinny. He's obviously malnourished, and you need help to restore him to his former glory. All jokes aside though, he's quite good, and you can sneeze on enemies to knock them back and make your brimstone stronger. I have nothing else to really say about him, he's just pretty good. A tier for Azazel. Bethany is so goddamn awesome, and she'd be so much higher if it wasn't for the fact that she only has red health. This means that the only way to protect your deals is with a bone heart. Her Book of Virtues gives you a free angel deal, and it spawns very useful with though. It also doesn't take up an active item slot, and it actually changes depending on which active item you have. It's incredibly complicated, all the width and everything your book does, but it's also just amazing. You can keep soul hearts that you pick up and use them as charges on your active items. This leads to crazy runs where you can spam your active item in the final fight and just destroy the boss. Bethany is great, and she sits very comfortably in A tier. The Forgotten is the wonderful little skeleton with a bone club that smacks people. Just like Tainted Maggie, his melee does 6 times your damage and is very, very powerful. He can also go ghost form to fly and shoot spectral tears while being chained to his body. Overall, he's just very good, and he's one of my favorites to play as. Imagine, every item you find lets you choose between 2 of them. This is what Tainted Isaac is. It's very powerful and allows you to get super strong items very easily. The downside is that he has 8 item slots, but that's not a big deal when you can get a shit ton of great items and become a killing machine. Our final A tier character is Azazel. Azazel is probably the best character to start as an Isaac. He flies, he shoots brimstone that does crazy damage, and he has black hearts that hurt everything if you get hit. This is his biggest downfall though. He's just too easy. This makes the game really boring when you play as him. He's still really good, but the reason he isn't higher than A is just because he's just boring. And also because both Azazel's being an A tier was just funny. Now we're here. These are my favorite characters that I constantly love to play, and the ones that I consider to be the best of the best. Kain is so amazing, and has probably been my favorite buff in all of Repentance. Kain starts with the paperclip, it opens any locked chest for free, and the luck foot, which makes all pills good pills and generally gives you better luck. Not only does he have these amazing starting items, but his base damage multiplier is 1.20, making him have a damage stronger than most characters. Kain is just perfect and makes him the first character of S tier. Here is another two characters that I'm bundling together. The Keepers are both very similar, and they are both goddamn amazing. They generate huge heaps of money and make it very easy to heal back damage being done to you. You can easily buy shop items and devil deal items to make your runs very powerful. Tainted Keeper is slightly better in my opinion. The ability to make enemies spawn money is really good, and I usually stay at 99 coins in my runs with him. He also makes shops much better, making them spawn item room items too. I love both Keepers, and they're definitely deserving of this S tier. Judas is one of my favorite characters in the game. He starts with 1 health, but he is a pure damage machine. He has a whopping 1.35 times damage multiplier, and has the Book of Belial to boost it if you ever get it put in a pinch. He doesn't have a lot, but he doesn't need it to be S tier. The top of S tier is Tainted Bethany. She is an item farming machine. She's basically the opposite of normal Bethany, but in a really good way. She only has soul hearts and collects red health to use as charges. Instead of the Book of Virtues, she has Lamegedon. With this, she generates a whiff of an item that orbits around her. As long as she keeps the whiff, she keeps the effects of the item. She can use this to farm a shit ton of items to make her super OP, and even if you're not getting anything good from item rooms, this book brings her to the top of S tier. This brings us to the best of the best. The final tier of the list, the S+ tier. This is the tier of my favorite characters of all time. These are my go-tos anytime I play. Tainted Lilith is a baby slinging machine. Her primary attack is to shoot a baby out of her stomach, then knocks everything back and deals a huge amount of damage. The baby also shoots tears, and you can control it. She is so fun to play, and watching as all the enemies get smacked around from the little child that you sling is amazing. The baby is so powerful that it alone pushes her all the way up to S+ tier. Tainted Judas is probably the most badass goddamn character in this entire game. He has a crazy shadow dagger that you can use to slice through every enemy you see in the room. You get a temporary damage boost after using it, and it depends on how many things that you slice through. The more you kill, the stronger you get, and it also gets rid of any tears that you hit with it. He is my favorite tainted character of all goddamn time, and I love this guy with all my heart. He sits right up at the top of S+ tier. I know that this may have been kinda obvious, but the top of S+ tier is Isaac, the boy himself. He is just incredibly versatile. He starts with balanced stats and health, and he can easily create a powerful run for himself by just using the D6. The D6 is so fucking good, it can turn anything you don't want into something better, and can save a seed. Isaac himself sits right at the top of S+ tier. I know what you're thinking. Didn't I just say S+ was the last tier? Well, guess what? I fucking lied. Because in D tier, we have... That's goddamn right. My favorite character, and who I consider to be the best character in the game, is the Lost. With the Holy Mantle, Eternal D6, and free Devil Deals, he has all of the tools in the game to destroy every single run. Not only does he have all of this, but Repentance gave him the biggest buff of all time in the form of Perfection. This trinket drops after clearing 3 floors without taking damage. And guess what? The Lost can't take any damage, so he's guaranteed to get the trinket every single run. It gives you a plus 10 luck increase until you take damage, which will never happen for the Lost, unless you have extra lives. This causes all of his luck-based items to trigger basically 100% of the time. Holy Mantle also causes him to be able to take a free hit of damage every room, basically giving him infinite HP as long as you don't get hit twice in a room. All of these reasons are why the Lost sits right at the top of the tier list. So, what did you think of this tier list? I know that a lot of you guys may not agree with some of my choices, so go ahead and comment down below what you'd change about my list. If you'd like to see more Isaac content in the future, be sure to like the video, and subscribe so that you'll be able to catch more videos like this. I'll see you guys next time, so peace out.